Supreme on the track. You're now tuned in to the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast, and I'm your host, Supreme Decisions. Now, today, I'm going to get into a story of search and seizure, police misconduct, but it comes from a Supreme Court case of Torres versus Madrid. Now, or Torres, excuse me. Because a lot of us have misconceptions of the ideals of qualified immunity. Now, I've told you or even given you Supreme Court cases in which we discussed or I informed you of the actual context of qualified immunity and how it's lost. The long and short, it's lost through willful acts against the Constitution and against their oath and department policies, or through ignorance by performing something, that's routine or common simply because that's what they do and most people don't fight back against it. Those are performances of ignorance. If you're performing your job through ignorance, then you do not have the capability of completing an action with your job. So therefore, you lose your qualified immunity. And even through the context of the differentiation between qualified and absolute immunity. Because most time we're speaking about absolute immunity, we're talking about those that are a sitting judge. Sometimes we talk about it in the instance of the prosecution because they hide behind the mask of harmless error. When in fact, I've shown you how to actually go through and defeat those things. But today, we're going to talk about it simply in the context of, I want to say Tennessee v. Gardner, but I'm going to get deeper into the actual context of Tennessee v. Gardner. But this came to me because I was doing a case in which Tennessee v. Gardner was very prevalent. So, Torres versus Madrid actually came because, if you remember, we did the Tyrese Nichols insight, and I talked about the Baltimore Police Task Force. Because when we're talking about criminal charges being placed onto a police officer for their actions, we forget about the fact that I also spoke about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, where I spoke about police having quotas or being incentivized, for the instances of the monthly quotas that they would have to make a stop, which means there are a lot of people that are not doing anything illegal that are being stopped and ticketed or even arrested. Because if we talk about our prison system or jailing system, we have 847,000 out of 2.1 million that are incarcerated simply because they cannot make bail in a place where the average family, which is 75% of Americans, live below the poverty line, and then the 80% of Americans that literally live paycheck to paycheck, because that doesn't even deal with poverty. Because I've met many of doctors who are making 6 figures and 7 figures a year, and they're literally broke at the end of the month. So poverty and the ideals of living paycheck to paycheck creates our bail system, which is 840,000 plus that are incarcerated currently because they can't make bail. And if you're missing checks, then therefore you are falling into a impoverished line. So when I talked about the quotas that police officers have and even the promotions, we talked about Officer Wayne Jenkins, who with the Baltimore Gun Trace Task Force, and how he was convicted of RICO because he was the one robbing, stealing, planting evidence, and all of this shit was on video. And I even spoke about Frankenstein's monster. Because you remember, Dr. Frankenstein was the one who created the monster. The monster never was named. He was just Frankenstein's monster. And that came in the context of Christopher Donner. Christopher Donner was the monster that the LAPD created because of Teresa Evans. Remember, I probably introduced her to most of you the first time when I did Frankenstein's monster. Because Teresa Evans was the training officer of Christopher Donner who kicked the mentally ill man who was going through a schizophrenic episode while he was handcuffed in the head and in the chest. And Christopher Donner reported her. And Christopher Donner then was vilified while Teresa Evans was promoted. Because again, all of these are incentives for bad cops to be worse. And then the bad cops are training good cops to be bad cops. And even the end of it, a bad cop is a good cop's worst nightmare. And these are the things that we are talking about in the corrections of it. Because if we don't start talking about it, I'm going to say that again. If we don't start talking about it, we can't look for a solution. And if we can't start acting on the ideals of a solution, we're going to experience the continued abuse from police officers. Because where there is no accountability, there is no reason for change. I'm going to say that when there is no accountability, there is no reason for change. Now I'm going to read something to you because many of us have no idea what this deals with. Because Torres versus Madrid is one of those where Torres was part of a wild encounter by police officers for the most part. And in this encounter with the police officers was sprayed for fleeing a person's car with bullets, hitting her in the back as she drove away. Now, the reason why this is prevalent, because I talked about the he said, she said. If you go watch that video, I talked about how a police officer must conduct this thing called the totality of circumstances. Yes, they get information over a scanner. Yes, they get it from dispatch to show up. But now it's their job to do due diligence of what is actually going on, because the person on the phone has no idea what's actually happening because they're not at the scene. So again, the wild encounter in which police officers sprayed Torres' car with bullets, hit her in the back as she drove away. Now, this is where the context of Tennessee v. Gardner comes in, because I talked about in Tennessee v. Gardner, in order for police officers to shoot at a suspect, there has to be the imminent threat of death or danger or harm to someone else or the police officers. But it has to be done with something other than the vehicle. I'm going to say that again. It has to be done with something other than the vehicle. And as I go along, you're going to get more context to this. Because the application of the use of physical force to the body of an individual with the intent to restrain constitute a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. Does not mean and does not go into the context of submission, and is not going into the context of someone being subdued. A police officer, because you remember I told you, once a police officer pulls a gun out, that is an aggravated assault. Understand that. Because even giving you instructions absent a crime is a show of authority stop and a violation of Terry v. Ohio. You can actually go through it because I've done literally 5 videos on it. So when we're talking about a seizure, we're talking about the mens rea. What was the police intent for pulling out their gun? It's to enact a seizure. That's what they were thinking about. That itself is a guilty act. And once you perform a guilty act, Nothing legal can form behind it. Illegality is the initiation of something. You cannot then be legal afterwards. Now understand this, because I got to give you the context of this, because no one's going to understand the full gravitas of this situation unless I read it. So now, on July 15th, 2014, 4 police officers arrive at an apartment building in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They're there to execute a warrant for a woman accused of several crimes, including white-collar crimes, drug trafficking, murder, and additional violent crimes. Now let's understand this, because remember I talked about what the police know going into it. They know that the person they're looking for is accused of white-collar crimes, drug trafficking, murder, and additional violent crimes. And this is one of the things I talked about, because if you allow a police officer to actually have someone arrested and they put on your arrest charges, violence against a police officer, that is going to be the thing that is read to every police officer, any call that they have or potentially call that they have in additional encounters with you. And if you have dark skin, you need to be wary of this. These are things that cannot be allowed to go through simply because they're going with the intent that you are a violent person, that you may injure them. Why? Because the self-talk that is done to them on a daily is that every person they're encountering is going to hurt them. Everybody that they see is a criminal. Everybody is going to do something to them. And you have to be on your toes. You got to be wary of the threat. If that self-talk is the one thing that's going into you every day, that's what your body is going to respond to. That is why we are building a nation of police officers that are shooting first, which is their one lethal weapon, and doing away with their 7 other non-violent ends of attack, because they're not smart enough to do the other stuff, and they're not trained or prepared to even do schoolwork, which is paperwork. That's why they don't hire the smartest of us. I'll get back into that. But understand, they're there to execute a warrant on a woman. Let's stop right there. Just note that. They're there to execute a warrant on a woman. After observing Roxanne Torres and her company standing by a car, one police officer concluded neither individual was the subject of the warrant. Let that sink in. They're there to arrest a woman who is known for white-collar crimes, drug trafficking, murder, and additional violent crimes. Police officer points out Roxanne Torres and her companion are not the people that they're looking for. I'm going to say that they are not. The police conclude that Roxanne Torres is not the person they're looking for. But you remember when I first started this off, I talked about how a wild encounter in which police officers sprayed a fleeing person's car with bullets. The person that they sprayed with bullets was a person that they knew was not the person they were looking for. They themselves concluded that. It wasn't something that was told to them. It wasn't something that they were guessing at. It was something that they knew for a fact prior to shooting, or, spraying the car of Roxanne Torres with bullets. They knew this. They knew that she wasn't guilty of a crime. They knew she wasn't the person they were looking for. They knew it. So now I'm going to go back to something, because somebody told me, well, you never know what a police officer is told. Now, I do know what the police officer is told because it's written down. I'm looking at the transcript. It's written down, which is cool. I also do know that the police officers concluded Torres and her companion, neither individual was the subject of the warrant. Now, I don't speak that way, so I have to be reading this. But why would I even bring that up? Because I'm going to read the Fourth Amendment to you. The right of a person to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and remember I told you the biggest words in law, if, and, or, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. That's your Fourth Amendment. Roxanne Torres had a right not to speak to the police officers. She had a right. Florida v. Royer. And also the stupid Fifth Amendment, where she has the right to remain silent. The police had already performed a totality of circumstances, yet and still they felt her not speaking to them, even though they knew she was not the person they're looking for, they felt it necessary to assault this woman with spraying her car because she's driving off. But then we talk about the hate you give. Come back with that same energy. But when it's reciprocated, now it's a problem. Yes, I pause for dramatic effect because I want you to understand, since this incident, New Mexico has placed a ban on, what is this? Qualified immunity. I don't know what happened to me just then. I had a little brain fart. But what happens is, the context of it is police officers, because of this incident, because remember I told you, willful acts, right? And you know, everyone that's with someone that commits a felony, an aggravated assault, is liable if there are any injuries involved in that commission. There were 4 officers. Those 4 officers are now liable for the actions of one officer who stated she's not the person we're looking for, but still with a willful mind decided to open fire and spray the car of Roxanne Torres. Colorado has Senate Bill 20-217, Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act, which means in Colorado, where they absolutely need this act, police officers are denied qualified immunity when they act outside of their constitutional obligation, which they derived to choose to volunteer, uphold, and support. Because remember, they're the fiduciaries. They're the trustees of the people. So if you're committing an aggravated assault against the person that you are supposed to be putting in a better position, you are violating your oath. You are now not protected by qualified immunity simply because the state's not footing the bill for you. Because you knowingly, you performed a willful act. Because what you have to understand is, even in the context of this one, Roxanne got into a car when she saw the police, which she's allowed to do. One of the police officers, even after noting that she was not the person they were looking for, attempted to open her car door as she drove away. Police cannot enter one's vehicle or person or home without consent, a warrant, or exigent circumstances. If she's not the person they're looking for, exigent circumstances are gone. If she's not the person they're looking for and she does not give them consent, they need a warrant. They can't get a warrant because she's not the person they're looking for, and the warrant they have is for someone else. It's for a different person. It's for a different property. They don't have the right to open her door. The officers fired a total of 13 bullets at Torres, hitting her in the back twice, leaving her left arm temporarily paralyzed. That's where we talk about imminence. Police officers are only able to fire their weapon if there is imminent danger. If you hit someone in the back twice, the danger or threat is gone. Not my words. This is law. This is literally the definition of imminent. Imminent is happening right now. If it is going away from you, there is no threat to you. She has to be using something other than a car. She's not even the person they're looking for. Why are they shooting 13 times? Food for thought, because I want you to understand, and this is for the police apologists, because they say if you go to court, if you plead guilty to something, you must have done it. Note what I said when I started off. The police was there for someone else. The police concluded Torres was not the person they were looking for. Torres pled no contest to several crimes: aggravated fleeing from law enforcement officers, assaulting a police officer, and unlawfully taking a motor vehicle. It was her car. She got, but I'm actually go back. I'm gonna go back to this. During my RICO trial, there was a young man, I'm not gonna say his name. He took a deal for 5 years for a RICO charge. Now keep this in mind, that was the deal, 5 years. And on cross-examination, I told him, I said, I don't have any questions, other than I'm going to restate your testimony. I said, you had a home. The Wells Fargo refused to give you your deed. I said, absolutely. Said, was your house even in the Atlanta? No, my house was not in Atlanta. Okay. You called me for help. Absolutely. Wells Fargo challenged the paperwork we had sent. Absolutely. Said, and you never paid me a dime. I said, not at all. I said, so what was your crime? Because they didn't have jurisdiction to charge you. And the crime would have to come from Wells Fargo. He said, oh, Wells Fargo was taking me to court to actually show the last payment had not been made. And I was showing them that I have the check to show. So we were going to court. I said, so you took a deal for something that's not a crime. And he sat on the stand, and I walked away. I didn't say no more questions. I just walked away. Because that's what Torres did. She took a deal for doing what she had the right to do, which is to leave the scene of someone trying to kill her, knowing she was not the person they were looking for. But then she later sued for the excessive force against her. Because out of the 4, only 2 officers fired at her. Here's my question. I always ask this question, because I've asked this, with the young man who broke down in North Carolina, and there were 20 police officers on scene, yet 1 police officer fired a shot. Why the other 19 didn't shoot? Because the other 19 did not feel that that person was a threat. 4 officers on scene, only 2 fired. Why? Because the other 2 knew Torres was not a threat. Because the other 2 knew she was not the person they was looking for. The other 2 knew she hadn't committed a crime. Yes, that's my police apologist segment, because I want you to understand. But here we go. Here's the great part about this. The District of New Mexico, Judge Flashing. Now, I'm actually going to go deeper into Judge Flashing and his decisions and cases, just to give you context, but not today. But he granted the police motion for summary judgment, asserting qualified immunity and the absence of a seizure rising under the 4th Amendment claim. Let's go back and revisit that real quick. The application of physical force to the body of an individual with the intent to restrain constitute a seizure under the 4th Amendment. When the police officer attempted to open her door, that was an attempt at a seizure. When the police officers fired to stop her from fleeing, that was an attempt at a seizure. Doesn't matter that both of those attempts were illegal, But the simple fact that they did it, they had the mens rea of these acts. That's what constituted the seizures. Now, I want y'all to pay attention, because today I told you I'm going to do a little bit of teaching today. To overcome an officer's claim of qualified immunity, you need to show that their conduct violated established, constitutional, or a statutory right. Understand, to overcome the officer's claim of qualified immunity, you need to show that the officer's conduct violated a clearly established constitutional or statutory right. Because the Constitution itself is not a book of rights. It's a list of government restrictions. Because the government doesn't have the right to. Because the Constitution is not a letter to you. It's not a letter you swear to. It's not your contract. It's theirs. So when we're talking, oh, I got a Fourth Amendment right, technically, because it's not your right to have. It's your right to not be infringed on. Hence, that's why it states that a person has the right not to have this infringed on. Because they're not talking to you, they're talking to the government. Understand that. It's not a book of rights. It's a list of restrictions. Understand something. When you're doing these things, because a 1983 is a civil rights, when you're doing something, they ask a question on your complaint. It's called the element of cause. Goes under civil rights violation. Now, the problem with that, a lot of people in the context of, oh, civil rights, so I'm not black. Because they don't understand we're speaking a different language. Latin moves the court. Contracted rights were violated. Remember, I said it's not your contract. Civil in Latin means contract. Civil means contract. Your contracted rights are violated. The contract is not with you. It's with that piece of paper. If you're taking the oath of a governmental agent, that governmental agent is a servant. They're taking an oath of servitude. That's what it means to be a fiduciary. That's why when it's a violation of a fiduciary duty, they're talking about these acts because they took an oath. They signed that oath. They filed that oath. That is a record. It is witnessed. When that is violated, your contracted rights have been violated. So I have a lot of people that want to argue with me about these things. But when we're talking about it, I'm giving it to you so you can win. You don't have to listen. Everybody's not born to win. And I get that. I've accepted that. You don't have to win, but I don't give it to you unless it's a tool to win. Because when you're doing something like this, you have to show that you had been seized and that seizure was unreasonable. How do you do that? By showing that seizure, that unreasonable seizure, violated a constitutional right or a statutory right. So keep those in mind, because when we're talking about it, because like I said, I'll keep bringing it up. But here, the clearly established would be the knowledge she was not the suspect. In Tennessee v. Gardner, police had no reasonable suspicion or probable cause she would be a threat to them or anyone else. Because Florida v. Royer and the Fifth Amendment, she has the right not to speak to them at all. Thus shooting her in the back, police lacked imminent danger. The one thing they need to be able to fire their weapon, they lacked. Not because of anything that Torres did. Keep that in mind. It's because of their own conclusions. They knew she was not the suspect. They concluded she was not the suspect. The police officers concluded that Roxanne Torres was not the person they were looking for. So they didn't have any of the other stuff. There was no reason to believe. So it takes the reasonableness away from them. Because Torres alleged that the officers had exercised excessive force by intentionally discharging their weapons at her. Notice I talked about the willful acts. Intentionally. Intent. It is literally in there. The officer's intent was to seize her. And the officers had conspired to use such force against her. The reason why she used conspire is because when you have more than two people there and there's an action of conspiracy, hence she was charged and she pled guilty to something, and there were multiple people involved in it that were okay with it. This context of conspiracy is placed in that one statement. The prosecutor was part of it because the prosecutor knew the whole story, because that's what the prosecutor was using to charge her. The prosecutor understood the story because the prosecutor has to tell the story. So now you have the four officers. The DA, that's 5. The prosecutor, that's 6. And now even the actions of the judge, because the judge has to be a neutral magistrate. The judge does not have to accept a plea. The judge do not have to accept a prosecutor's overzealous act or charge. But here's where you talk about the absolute immunity. The judge still has the ability to fall under harmless error. Because remember, I talked about the reading portion of it. Nobody's reading over 8 pages. And 8 pages is the absolute max. That don't even mean a person that's going to read will get to 8 pages. 8 pages is the max. I've actually had people tell me, well, I need you to write a 22-page complaint because I want it to be worthy. Cool. You be worthy. I'll write something that wins. Because I know they're not going to read 22 pages of anything. And I often ask people that say, well, I need it to be worthy. When was the last time you read 22 continuous pages of anything? All of them have to take a moment to think. Because no one, it's less than 1% that have graduated high school. And that includes the people in college. No one's doing it anymore. That does not happen. It is a unicorn to see someone reading 22 continuous pages of anything in one sitting and actually saying, all right, now let's base a conclusion on that. It's not happening. And if you think so, good luck. In my Liam Neeson voice. Because at the end of the day, it's understanding the context and playing to your audience. Because when we're talking about this, even in the 1983s, we must demonstrate the government had physical control over you. That's those, again, a long soliloquy of what happened. The detail. The devil is in the details, because the more you say, the more you have to prove. And you are not the one that has to prove anything. And I think that's the programming. You think you have to justify your actions as an adult. When in fact, if you have some accusations, how them young folks say, show me the receipts. I need to see the receipts. Put them on the wood. Let's go. Because at the end of the day, you making accusations. Prove what you saying. I ain't saying anything. Because I don't have to. Whoops. That's the part that most people miss. Because We're told that we have to. Oh, well, you have to talk to us. No, we don't. If I'm a police officer, you're just a police officer. That just means that you volunteer to be a servant. Always understand that. Because the application of physical force to the body of a person with the intent to restrain constitutes a seizure, even when the force does not subdue the person. So even if you are restrained in any form, even if it's not physical, because remember I told you, a police officer giving you instructions that restricts your locomotion. They give you an instruction you follow, that is a Fourth Amendment violation if it's absent a crime. Roxanne Torres hadn't committed a crime. Literally. She wasn't the person they were looking for. They knew she wasn't the person. They concluded that she wasn't the person. Nobody else did. Nobody made that decision for them. They knew she was not the person. They concluded she was not the person. They still shot at her. Keep that in mind, police apologists, because I want y'all to catch that part. It wasn't because she was literally doing nothing. She was minding her business. You know, what you're allowed to do. Mind your... You know what? The hardest thing about business is minding your own. She was minding her own business. Police still attempted to subdue her, still shot at her 13 times, hitting her in her back, and she had not committed a single crime. They even charged her with stealing her own stealing her own car. She stole her own car. Yet, they weren't there for her. They knew she wasn't doing anything. They knew this. But we'll find a way to actually make her a bad person. Oh, that's right, because she used to be on drugs. So that means something. Because she wasn't on drugs at the time they were there and shooting her in the back. She actually wasn't even doing drugs. She didn't even have any drug paraphernalia. She had no drugs in her system. Why? Because she had to go to the hospital. Whoops. We can think of some other stuff, but none of it applies to that situation. Understand, the perception nowadays is what gets people caught up because people need to believe the lie. Because if you have any scope of changing your mind, any scope of rejecting the programming, you then have to be a different person, or you have to bathe in the ignorance of your own life. And absolutely pause for dramatic effect, because I want you to let that sink in. That's something that you have to deal with. That's something you have to live with. You're either going to be blissfully ignorant, or you're going to blatantly hold someone to reality, which is why they have the totality of circumstances, because they need a whole story to actually come to a conclusion. You can't come up with a conclusion when you don't have all the information, which is why whenever I'm talking to people that tell me that, oh, I've been doing law this time, I've been doing that, and then whenever I talk to them and I give them something, they go, oh, shit. I didn't know that. That's because you're playing a game and you don't even have all the pieces. You're sitting down in front of something, you don't even know the language they're speaking. Because I'm going to give you another fun story. I'm here in El Paso. I'm literally a block from Mexico. Right? In the context of that, here in El Paso, there are at least 3 dialects of Spanish. At one point in my life, I lived in Miami. In Miami, there are a lot of Spanish-speaking Cubans and Venezuelans, and all of them have different dialects of the same language. I met a young man a couple of days ago from Honduras, and he went to talk to me, and I was like, oh, it sounds like Spanish. It sounds like it. He had to tell me what he said, because oh, yeah, I'm from Honduras. And I was like, what are you speaking? He was like, oh, I'm speaking Spanish. And I was like, are you serious? Spanish. I've known now there are at least 7 different dialects of the exact same language. And it's amazing. They're speaking the same language, but they're having different meanings in that same context. You're looking at it and you're accepting words for what you believe they are instead of what they actually mean. You go out and get a Black's Law Dictionary and like, oh yeah, I'm good. And it's edition 19. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen something that got photocopied 19 times, but at some point, it's not going to be as good as the original. And those that are basketball heads, I actually love people when we had a conversation because a lot of times people don't even bring up Kobe. They go from Jordan to straight LeBron. Straight line, boom. And they forget that one of the greatest winners was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. One of the second greatest winners was Irvin Magic Johnson. But people always ask me, how do we keep skipping over Kobe so easy? I said, because Kobe was Michael. He was a duplicate copy of Michael. Michael even said it. The only person that could beat me is me, except for maybe Kobe, because Kobe stole all my moves. Mike said the only person that could beat him is him, and the closest person to him was Kobe. Kobe was so close to Michael, we can't even see him when we're talking about greatness. Understand that when we're talking about the greatest of all time, because he was so close, we can see the second copy, the third copy, the fourth copy, the fifth. We can see the 19th copy. Why? Because it's so different from the first. So when you're getting these additions of law, and I'm going to even say something too, even when you're getting the additions of the Bible, it is so far from the original dialect of the Bible that it is nonsensical at this point. If you're getting a today's English or a New English Standard Version and is copyrighted in 2022, you are in trouble. Because you're missing the message that was given in the original text. We don't just jump on something simply because it's the new hot thing. Everything doesn't work that way. Unless we're going to bathe in our own ignorance. We're going to bathe in our own blissful ignorance. That's why God loves fools and babies, because they don't know anything. They can't be responsible for anything. So most people will love to bathe in their blissful ignorance rather than accepting the harsh reality. That's why I give you red pill. Because again, the red pill diaries are things that force you to accept the realities. I don't allow for the blissful ignorance to take place. I can't allow that to take hold. I can't even allow you to be heard through that. So understand, in California v. Haradi D, common law arrests are seizures, and the common law treated application of force to the body with the intent to restrain as an arrest, even when the arrestee escaped. Now, I know I said something that a lot of you use, but don't know how to actually wield that weapon. A lot of you guys are babies with handguns. Don't know how it's going to end, but at some point you're going to end up on the news because you're just wheeling it around. Just idly shooting, hoping some get hit. Understand, common law arrests are seizures, and the common law treated application of force to the body with the intent, the mens rea. I keep going back to that because there are 3 actions of a crime, 3 elements. I literally did this the first year, 2017, that I was doing this on YouTube. 2017. 3 elements of a crime. Mens rea. The one thing that every statute for a crime to actually be is the intent. It is the reason why the prosecutor loses trials, because they have to prove what you are thinking. They have to prove intent. And we talked about the police officer's intent. The opening of the door was intent to restrain. The shooting at her was intent to restrain. And even if not done properly, a detention can form an arrest. Any intent to restrain is an arrest. Always understand that. They're putting you in handcuffs. That is an arrest because you are restraining and restricting my freedom of movement, even if one escaped, because arrests are seizures of a person. You often hear police, well, you're not on arrest, but you are restraining me. Remember, I talked about a police officer putting one under felonious conditions is a violation. Why? Because common law arrest are seizures. The common law treated applications of force to the body, putting one in handcuff, with the intent to restrain. The restraining is the handcuff, is an arrest. That came from California v. Hodori D. These aren't the words of Supreme Decisions. This isn't Richard L. Bay. This is California v. Hodori D. And they're talking about something that's even older than that. Because arrests are seizures of a person. Don't allow stupid people to give you stupid information. Because if I tell you a cop is not intelligent enough to articulate what even probable cause is, not my words, it's actually written in law. Why would you then listen to someone tell you, oh, you're not under arrest, while they are arresting you? Don't look at what I'm doing. Listen to what I'm saying. Never mind that we're shooting at you. We're not trying to hurt you. Common law governs arrest was the correct approach for the case at hand. They were shooting at her. She had done nothing wrong. Common law governs arrest was the correct approach for this case. Notice I talked about law being situational, not subjective. I'm going to say that again. Law is situational, not subjective. Common law governs arrest was the correct approach for this case at hand. For this case, this context and application of common law was correct. It doesn't happen for every case, which is why I tell people don't use templates, because every case doesn't work the exact same way. Every aspect of Terry v. Ohio doesn't work in every situation. So you have to understand, that's why even when you see a motion written up, they're talking about a case and they show what part of the case actually applies. And it's not a blanket statement. It's a scene holding. The slightest touch constitutes an arrest without requiring that officer keep the party so arrested under restraint. And it's called the mere touch rule. The majority explained that the lack of founding era precedent for a shooting constituting a seizure could be explained because even though guns did not exist during the founding era, they were not used by law enforcement to apprehend. I might actually read that one more again, because I talked about how police officers, the first thing they grab is their most lethal weapon. I talked about the self-talk that they have every day. I talk about, again, okay, let me apologize for a hot second, because talk to the police apologists right now. Because they want you to understand, policing is a dangerous conundrum. It's dangerous to be a police officer, yet it's not in the top 30 of most dangerous jobs. Uber driving is more dangerous than being a police officer. A Pizza Hut delivery driver is more dangerous than being a police officer. A window washer is more dangerous than being a police officer. Understand, there are literally 30 other occupations that are more dangerous than being a police officer, but we must understand that being a police officer is dangerous. Yet, although guns existed during the founding era, because remember, we're talking about the 1800s, they were not used by law enforcement to apprehend. Yet it is the first thing law enforcement uses to apprehend now. If guns were not used when policing was founded, why are they the first thing that police are using to apprehend right now? Guns were prevalent then as they are now. We look at any Western. How are they robbing people? With guns. So police aren't using guns back then to apprehend, but they're using now. And I talk about, again, the self-talk. We're either creating killers or we're creating cowards. Because if I'm constantly telling you people are going to hurt you, if I'm constantly telling you everybody is a threat, and if you are listening and that is going into your mens rea, that is going into your subconscious, that is going into your body development, that is going into your body response, because this, I unconsciously did this. Why? Because you were unconsciously told, you were programmed. Attack, 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 attack. And now I'm going to give you stock language because I know you can't articulate, because you can't even think for yourself. Whoops. Whoops. Did I just say something? I just want to know, did it just say something? Because if I'm constantly telling you attack, 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 and then tell you, you can't think for yourself. So I'm going to think for you. But remember that stock language? Because they have to act fast, right? It has to be second nature. Stop resisting. He went for my gun. I was in fear for my life. You remember those statements? I think we heard them once or twice. I think we heard them a couple times. Why are we hearing them from every police department and in every police shooting? We're creating killers or we're creating cowards. If they weren't used to subdue when the founding fathers set up an actual arrest, why are they the first thing? And again, when I talk about it, I keep going back to they have 7 other non-lethal options available to them at all times. Because just understand, when you objectively manifest something, it becomes a bodily response. I keep saying mens rea because I'm talking about the police intent was to seize. What you understand? The police intent, the mens rea, because it is a criminal act. That is the act that they can't. That's most difficult to prove. That is the act that they're. Often hear people say, "Well, I don't listen to what you say. I watch what you do." I'm not listening to the shit that they're talking because one, I know they don't understand what they're saying. I don't listen to stupid people. I watch what they do. I use you against you. I'm not going to sit up here and make up something. I can actually use you against you. Your police report. Your warrant application. Your video. I don't have to prove anything. I'm going to use all that against you. Because I know you can't tell the truth. I know you can't watch something and articulate from it. I know you aren't trained properly, especially in Georgia. But the objectively manifestation of fear. If I'm constantly being pumped, fear, 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 hurt, 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 danger, 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 I'm going to respond in such. That's why we always tell you that was that the AMSR. It's constantly reinforcing positive vibes. And we talked about the law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It's not going to be transferred from one place to another. But we also talk about the inability for a police officer to transfer the negative energy they pick up, because 99% of every interaction a police officer has is negative. So they're going from negative to negative to negative to negative, and now they don't have an outlet, so they go home and beat their partner. They don't have an outlet, so they go home and eat their gun. They don't have an outlet, so they go out and have fights. Why? Another aspect of having an IQ lower than 107. They don't have the ability to disseminate. They don't even have the ability to, let me rephrase that. They don't have a common exercise of disseminating. They don't have a common exercise, or not trained or programmed to actually be able to look at a situation objectively. These are, again, things you can look up. I can keep giving you these same cases, but I actually get tired of saying Jordan v. City of Prince. I get tired of saying it. Because, again, these aren't my words. These are written. And as it was written, I understand it. Because that's why I don't argue with a fool, because at a distance, they can't tell who is who. Understand. These are the things I'm giving you. I'm not constantly just saying the same thing over and over and over, because, again, that's how you learn. It's through repetition. I often hear people say, I can't wait till I get it like you. Are you listening to? Well, I ain't watched all of them, but and there's always something, because I always tell people there's always life. There's always life. I had life happen today. Did that change my obligations? Did my bills stop? Did everybody else stop breathing because I had a life situation? But the things that I deem important, those things are getting done. Today's podcast is something I deem that's important. I'm getting it done. I'm having life go on right now, but I'm getting it done. Because nobody cares about the excuses. All they care about are the results. And that also goes back to the next part of accountability. I told you I'm going to put out something every Monday at 5 a.m. That's my fault. If it's not put out at 5 a.m., 99% of the time it's my fault. It's that 1% of the time where I've done the right thing and they still screw up. And it's, you know what? I did it. I did. Now I'm finna get in your behind. But see, now I actually love the partnership I have with iHeartRadio and Spotify. Because if I go a couple weeks, they're like, hey, man, what's going on? Hey, you promised us something. What's going on? We not going to hound you, but we need something from you. We need you to hold up your end of this agreement. And you know what I say? I'm on it. Because, again, it's a partnership. They're not saying you got to clock in or something. They're telling us, hey, we're going to accept when you send it, but we need you to give us this amount, because that's what you're agreeing to. You have an audience. You have people that you have to answer to. You have people that are waiting on you. These are the same things that we're asking of the police. You have a duty. You have an obligation. We would like transparency. But if you're not going to give it to you, one of my favorite stories is a Tupac story. Tupac talked about, we were asking for civil rights back in the day because the context was, do he think minorities are free? He said we were asking with the civil rights movement. But what's funny is most people didn't know, quote unquote, the slaves were freed in 1800s. 80 years later, we were still asking to be freed. Let that sink in. 80 years later, we were still asking to be freed. Even after that sheet of paper was signed, we were asking to be freed. 2023, we're asking to be freed. He had a little song, we are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. Then it was, we're hungry, we need some food. He said, but now we're at the point that we have to just take it. Say, I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting. He had a mentality of going to get it. If you're not going to give us transparency, we're going to take transparency. If you're not going to give us what you are obligated to do, we are going to take it. And if you don't have that sort of mentality, if you're not willing to die for this, because understand, your life isn't yours, it's for the protection of those that are behind you. That's how you pay it forward. You sit up here and you want to say, because I'm actually going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I want to bring this up. In order to correct their behavior, right? The brain remembers pain and pleasure. We have to insert some pain. We have to insert some pain, because pain is how you learn. Spare the rod, spoil the child. We want them to change the training. We have to give them a reason to change the training. You want a bully to stop bullying, you have to hit that bully in the mouth and say, look, you know what, today is the day. I looked at my wrist, I got time today. Best believe I'm crossing the line today. I want you to understand that. Until you draw that line in the sand, they're going to continue doing it. Until you say, you know what, I've had enough, they're going to keep giving it to you. And they're going to keep escalating, you know, like a child does. Because a child, I actually had to inform my ex-wife one day, it was funny. He's like, why they keep, because he wants to see where the line is with you. They know where it's at with me. I'm zero tolerance. You do what I ask you to do, or there's a consequence for not doing it. And then you're going to do it. And that consequence escalates every time you do. Understand, I am prepared mentally and physically to execute the consequence because I'm teaching. I need you to understand that. We have to be the same way when we're dealing with our lives. Because I tell people all the time, I've got kids behind me. I got to make sure that their life is protected. How can I give them a dream if they can't live it? How am I going to say, you know, I did everything I could, but when it was my opportunity to fight back, I didn't? Because again, I'm gonna finish this, but I'm gonna go into something, because one of the people I was helping recently, it was one of the most scary things I had ever encountered. And the reason why it was scary to me was because this young man talked to me, man, I want to learn like you. I want to learn from you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And seeing, I don't know where the hell that's at. I'm going to do. Because a lot of people tell me about I'm going to do. I just have no idea where it's at because I've never seen it. And he kept saying, I'm going to help people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to. So then he goes into the context of, yeah, man, I'm going to help these people. And I want to do that. I want to do it just like you. I saw, that's what's up. He then got a case. Exactly. That's my whole point. How can you lead someone in their fight if when your opportunity to fight comes, you don't do it? How can you lead someone else to not have fear if the first thing that happens to you when you are confronted is to be fearful? That's why I tell people, don't ask me, because I'm combative. I was groomed. I was literally groomed to be combative. I was groomed to force to ask questions. I don't believe anything. You got to show me. Because I actually think I wasn't born in New York. I was born in Missouri. Because I'm from the show me state. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe anything you're telling me. You got to show me. And these are the things that we have to do with the police. I don't believe the things that you're talking about. You got to show me that you want improvement. You got to show me that you want to improve community relations. You got to show me that your intent is to be professional. Because even in this case, in response to the officer's contention that the doctrine outlined in Hodero applied narrowly to civil cases involving debtors and not to criminal cases involving felons, Chief Justice concluded that common law did not differentiate between the arrest of a debtor versus the arrest of a felon. Now, the officers, they said the arrest situation from common law doesn't apply to felons. Same officers that concluded Roxanne Torres was not a felon. The same officers that concluded that Roxanne Torres was not committing a crime. Keep that in mind. They're now saying, oh, it don't apply to felons, which she was not. By their own conclusion. They were completely oblivious to what they had said. Just let that sink in. They concluded she was not the person they were looking for. They concluded that she was not committing a crime. They created something and then made her that. And they completely oblivious to the fact that they concluded she wasn't. That, oh yeah, she was a felon. Not at the time you shot at her. Whoops. This is the context. This is the thinking of the people that you have policing you. These are the people that you get mad at and then you write a complaint to those same people. And it's always funny to me. Well, I wrote a complaint to the police. Really? You're complaining to police about police. Then you have an issue with the blue wall. Just like we talked about the man from Arizona that was arrested, the reporter. They said the case was closed. He called the witness. Case was closed. When the news called, oh no, the case has never been closed and it's always been open. And they played both voicemails. Different cops, different supervisors. We talked about the GTTF, Wayne Jenkins. Wayne Jenkins was the supervisor. So guess who's going to call you about the actions of his officers that you're complaining about? The supervisor. Because remember I talked about it. Most of the guys in the GTTF were supervisors. You're complaining about a subordinate to a supervisor that's just as corrupt or trained those subordinates. You're complaining to police about police and expecting something to happen. Why? Teresa Evans was a supervisor. Christopher Donner complained to her supervisor. He got fired. She got promoted. Let that sink in. They're being incentivized with promotions. Remember I talked about what color is the line? They're making sure bad officers can continue to be bad officers. But you're now going to entrust your bad happenings to bad officers. Because again, I would love for them to dispute the stuff that I've been putting out for years. But I've always noticed it's never a police officer that disputes the stuff that I say. Even the stuff that I said to the Arizona police commissioner, which got me banned from Twitter. Nothing I said was wrong. But he got upset and I was thrown off of Twitter for bullying. But then there were other people in Arizona posting and retweeting what I said. And they were then adding to the things that I said. Because they were talking about the aggression of the Arizona police force. Of Phoenix, the Phoenix police force, excuse me. I don't want to give the whole state something horrible, even though the whole state is one of the most violent in America. But anyway, I was doing the same thing that I would love for them to do. I would actually love for a police officer to come on the show. Because what's funny is every time I talk to a police officer, they'll say, oh, don't use my name. Oh, no, I don't want you to show my face. No, we can't talk about the police force I'm with. And I always smile because they're not worried about retaliation from the people they're policing. They're worried about cops. You know, no snitching, the blue line. They're worried about the blue line. They're not worrying about gang members. They're worrying about the members of gangs that are wearing uniforms and badges and supervisors. Because most of them are oblivious to the things that they say and even do. Because again, Jordan V. Prince, they're not very intelligent. I don't know how many times I can say it. I don't know how many times I can push forth the narrative of Jordan V. Prince. I don't know. I would love it to be something different. In fact, I actually noted the places like in California, I believe it was Berkeley, California, and even in parts of D.C., not every police precinct in D.C. made this mandate, but they then reversed it. They were requiring educated police officers. They weren't getting any. Applications dropped because you were required to not only have a criminal justice degree, but you had to have a certain score. No, I'm good. Because the intelligent people weren't going to be police officers. And those that were intelligent, that were going into the police academy, they were either denied or stopped going during training. I always look at that because even in the context of the two places that I've lived the longest, one is Georgia. Georgia is now deemed the worst policing system in the country. DOJ report, go read it. Department of Justice, for those who don't understand what DOJ means. But then El Paso. El Paso, we're looking at, well, probably not this year. 2023, got off a little rough. But out of the 7 years I've been here, we've been the safest city 6 of those years. And like I said, probably not this year. But here's the crazier part. I look at the police training. Police training in Georgia is incentivized to graduate people. They're the worst in the country, and their training is 6 weeks. El Paso, which is funny because I'm literally right down the street from the police training facility, is one of the safest policing departments in the country. Their training is almost a full year. Now, Switzerland has I believe, the safest, or the Netherlands or something like that, and their training is 3 years. Note, though, the safer you are, the longer the training. The less BS you have, the longer the training. Because if you're looking to understand, there's a disconnect. And most of the time when a police officer is being sued, the first thing they look at is the training. We're not looking at the thing they actually want us to look at. But I'm going to actually get back on this in a second. We're not looking at the correction. Because remember, I told you, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. The part of the problem is we know that they're not intelligent. We know that they're not trained properly. We know all of these things. But yet we go to court and then we listen to someone that we know is not on our side. And then we accept the ability to not fight. Because we're told we have no power, when in fact we're the most powerful person there. Because I voted in the judge. I voted in the DA. I voted in the police chief. All these people that are there in the courtroom, I voted them in. All of those people are there for my betterment. That means all those people there are my employees. Because if the defense attorney doesn't listen, the defense attorney has consequences. If the prosecutor does something that's not above board, the prosecutor has consequences. If the judge doesn't do something that's supposed to be in line with the people, which is myself, the judge has consequences. Let that sink in. I just want you to understand that. Because I give instructions to everybody there. How I do it is part of the context. Because how I speak for myself is any right not written is waived. So whenever I give instructions, I do it in writing. I don't go on tangents of why. I'm too grown to explain myself. You either do what I ask you to do, or again, I'm willing to affect the consequence of not doing what I'm asking you to do. Understand. I understand who I am. I understand what my power is. I understand their vulnerabilities. I understand their weaknesses because they are all servants. Because I employ each and every one of them. So I speak to them as employees, not as overseers. Understand the affecting of something. A lot of times it does sound crazy. If you go and watch a video that I put out in 2017, 2018, it sounds crazy. However, if you then watch or listen to this podcast, you're going to go, oh my God, that's what he was talking about. Or you might pull one to think, wow. Because again, at the end of the day, I string all this together for a reason. It is a purpose. There is a conquest that is being ventured upon. I want you to understand this. I don't give you this. And keep in mind, this isn't to downplay the police. This isn't in any form an attack on police. However, they are the first line that we must get by in defending our own freedoms. Because they are the ones who initiate all of our court inactions. Understand that. Because just like I told this one lady, she called me anti-police and I laughed. I said, I'm not anti-police, I'm anti-bad policing. And right now, I love J. Cole now. Because again, like I said, I got this interview he did. And the one thing he said, and he caught my attention because he took a deep breath when he was asked, are there good police officers? J. Cole's response was phenomenal. Because he said, I believe there are good people that are police officers. But how can they be good if they are part of a system that is corrupt and bad? If you're part of something that's bad, you're bad. Let's put it up. If you're voluntarily part of a system that is bad and you are participating in the badness of it, you are bad. That's what I have a problem with. And how Jay-Z said, those who make the laws, I'm going to always have smoke for them. Those who enforce these made up laws, I'm going to always have smoke for you. Those who choose to punish the innocent, I'm going to always have smoke for you. And if you don't understand the context of that, you call it militant, you call it whatever it is you like, but at the end of the day, listen to what I'm saying. I know that's difficult because that is actually the art of listening. It's a skill. It is a learned behavior to listen. Because many of us are given 2 ears and 1 mouth and we speak 3 times as much as we hear. Because instead of listening, we actually just wait for our turn to speak. Now I want you to understand this. This is, again, not an attack on police. This is a flagrant attack on the system itself. And the police are the first cog in that machine. And if I'm going to destroy or take down or dismantle or even reconstruct the machine, I have to take it apart first. There is no reconstruction without deconstruction. Always understand that. Because even in the context of this, a seizure is a singular act and not a continuous fact. So when we're talking about the mere touch, we're talking about the context of intent to restrain. That's why we have a kidnapping statute that says if someone is moved more than 8 feet, if someone is stopped from leaving or restricted of movement, their freedom of movement, it is a kidnapping action. Because the intent is to restrict. If I'm standing in front of a door not allowing you to leave, I am restricting your freedom of movement. That is an actual act. That is the intent of a felony. Always understand that. Because common law rule avoiding drawing lines that would have to be hard to administer. That's why when they stated this, the mere touch is any restraint is an arrest. Someone putting you in handcuffs, submitting you to felonious conditions. Always understand that. Because the officer an officer could demonstrate authority showing that they have restrained the liberty of an individual. The officer could use physical force to actually restrain or terminate the freedom of that person. An officer could demonstrate authority showing they have restrained the liberty of a person. Stop. Move. Go sit on the curb. Those are show of authority stops. Those are Terry v. Ohio violations. Absent an actual crime, those are illegals. Because again, police aren't told that's illegal. Police are actually trained to do it because they are told, they are in control. Really. Because you don't have any authority unless there's a crime. Let that sink in. How are you in control of something when there is no authority for control? Whoops. But again, these are the things I speak. If and or. Only have authority if, boom, a crime. So offering me instructions with absent a crime, you have no authority. You are a servant giving a master instruction. You are therefore violating your fiduciary duty, which is a show of authority stop. I've literally been, this is actually one of my highest, I think it's 18,000 views on that video. It's a trash video, don't get me wrong, but the information is amazing to me because I did not know people did not know that. How can a servant give me, because they'll tell you, well, I pay your salary, but then listen to everything the cop says. That is the most amazing thing to me. Because now I understand there are certain limits. But before you even get to that limit, you're not even going to test it? You're going to let these fools just get completely out of hand before you even, all right, cool. Go ahead. Because stupid is, stupid does. Because I often tell people, most people overstate the obvious. Because nobody ever, I never walk in the gym, boy, I'm 6'4", I'm 6'4 and a half, 306 pounds. If you come near me, you see I'm 6'4". If you get near me, you're going to, actually, you can probably see from a distance I'm 300 pounds. I don't have to state that because you can see that. That's like whenever you're going out and yell, well, I know my rights. If you did, you wouldn't be screaming. That's the great part about it. If you knew your right, that's why I love, again, the story of Samson. Samson, where did you get your strength? You would not ask a man, this Herculean dude with 24-inch pythons, where you get his strength from. You can look at him. So just that sentence alone lets me know that Samson was not a masculine, huge dude. That's why he had to tell people, oh, my hair. Yeah, I know I don't look like it. It's my hair. That's why it threw people like, what? Your hair? Hey, let me cut this off, see what happened. Oh, that was his hair. Because again, if I got 22, 24-inch arms, you can see I'm strong. You'll actually be surprised if I'm not. That'll be the surprise. Like, what? How are you not picking up this car? Because you don't overstate the obvious. I know my rights, then shut up. Because if you know better, and if you knew better, you do better. Because at the end of the day, overstating the obvious. When an officer demonstrates they have an authority over you, absent a crime, it's a show of authority stop. And it is illegal, Terry v. Ohio. And because remember, I'm gonna throw something at you. Bow, you ready? Because again, I've been saying this since 2017. This case is a 1968 case. Do you also remember the first things that I said at the beginning of this podcast? One of the things that you have to prove is clearly established law, and you were being seized and it was illegal. An officer demonstrating authority, showing they have restrained an individual, is a violation. That is clearly established. Why? Because it's been done in 1968. Clearly established. Because any police officer knows Terry v. Ohio because it's easy. Does 90% of them don't know the context of Terry v. Ohio because they don't practice it. And no one corrects them. But remember that. Clearly established. And then the show of the restraint. Whoops. See how I slide that in there? Because again, most people have all these tools to the game and have no idea how to use them. That's why you're calling me. Because I guarantee you, even though I'm saying these court cases, you have no idea still how to apply them. Most people have no context of the gravitas of what goes through in doing this. It takes a mentality. It takes a willfulness. It takes a foresight. It takes strategy. It takes understanding. It takes the ability and will to apply. It takes a certain mindset to apply this. And for me, like I tell everybody, this isn't something I wake up and do. This is my life. I wake up, go to sleep, I take pictures, I walk around, I go eat. All of it's law. And it just depends on how petty I feel like being on the day if somebody says something to me. Because with me, I see multiple angles even in the conversation. Because even we were having a conversation a couple weeks back about taking pictures into somebody's house or whatever. I said technically. Because most people don't understand law is situational, not subjective. Because can I shoot from the street into an open window? Absolutely. Can I get a drone while I'm standing in the street and fly that drone up 20 stories and then take a picture into a window? No, I cannot. Same thing, same act, same subject, different situation. And that's what and again, that's the way my mind works. Because I've been doing this for a very long time. But it's understanding these small nuances. Understanding that. Understanding the application and where it applies at. That's why whenever I ask certain questions, I don't need anything other than the answer. So when somebody shows me something, I act, oh, boom, okay, there's a mistake. And they're like, wow, how did you see that? It's because I know what I'm looking for. Because even in the context of that, I know what I'm looking at. I even asked a person sent me a contract one day, and he was like, hey, I want you to show me how to get out of it. I was like, all right, cool. So when he sent me the contract, and I looked, I said, okay, what is it that you're trying to get out of? And how are you trying to get out? What does out mean? That's why I do expectation management. What level of justice are you looking for? What is justice for you? Because again, whatever that line is, that's the line that you're willing to die for. Because that's the line you're willing to lose everything for. Because you're willing to keep fighting to get to that point. No matter what happens, you're willing to get there. That's why I asked that. And you know what's funny? Most people don't even know there's a line to draw because there's no line that they're looking to finish at. That's why I keep giving out these podcasts. That's why I keep, sharpening my skills. That's why I keep reading. That's why I keep reading more than 8 pages. That's why I also keep understanding application changes. Because even whenever I did something as simple as Mills v. DC, it was funny to me because most cops have no idea about Mills v. DC or Delaware v. Prowse. Both of them say stopping someone just to check their ID and registration is illegal. But they still put up roadblocks every day. Why is that? Because they know the people that's getting stopped accept it for what it is. General ground control is illegal. And it's clearly established when you sue someone. But again, somebody will drop that 1983 and then they'll bulk against the civil rights element. And then they wonder why they're losing. I just wasted that money. Absolutely, because you're not listening. There are literally books on how to do it. They're literal. Look, but again, it goes back to no one's reading over 8 pages. No one's doing that. But that's why I got the lessons today. Because I'm going to give you one more case even in this. Because when we're talking about the mere touch, one of the things that most police officers look to do when they have an escaping person that they shoot at, commit an aggravated assault on, they use Brower v. County of Inyo. And it was a 1989 case. Because they're using the context that the force has to be intentionally applied. Because somebody gets shot, I might be a bad shot at the range. So I might have just been shooting at you. Not really trying to hurt you, but I'm shooting. And they actually believe that's okay. And Brower actually allows for it to certain extents. Now, Graham v. Connor. Excessive force claims rising from investigatory stops, trying to give you a traffic ticket, or arrest, as opposed to be pre or post trial detentions, are governed by the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable seizure. But they are required to establish a seizure. Because remember, the claim itself that arises from investigatory stops or arrests comes from an actual seizure, which can be the gun under Graham v. Connor. The whole thing is you're told that you have to explore all state remedies first. The truth is, ensuring access to federal courts is particularly important for victims of police use of excessive force. Section 1983, the federal law that allows individuals to sue the government for civil rights violations. Oh my God, what did I talk about? Section 1983, the federal law that allows individuals to sue the government for civil rights violations. For civil rights violations. For civil contract rights violations. The Constitution. Constitutional violations. The contract. The oath contract. And I always tell people the easy. Get the oath of office. Because in showing any violation or any statutory violation from a government official, get the oath of office. Because that's their contract. That's it. That's why I tell people, when you go into risk management, understand why they are hiding it. Because it's never where it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be in the same building police work in. Or an adjacent building or something close. It's never there. I think I met one and it was because it was a small town. And it was funny because the guy didn't even know what I was asking for. Even the courthouse. Because a lot of people didn't realize a lot of your courthouses or hearings, for arraignments are very close to the police station. Risk management is also very close to the police station. Because those are strategic options. They're generally not in the same place, but they're very close. As Gwinnett County. Anyway, but understanding the context of this. They tell you to go to state first. Why? Because if I can stall, if I can give you all kind of other BS, if I can frustrate you, you don't want to file a 1983. Because now, whenever I give you the cheat sheet, I got a problem with you. I do things like retaliate. Because again, if it's not true, police apologists. Why is there a bill that stops police retaliation? Always something that actually gets to me. Now, the reason why I tell people this is the action, because again, the truth is, instead of going for state remedies, the federal courts are the greatest asset for victims. Why? Because police, let's go with the selective incorporation doctrine. Anything at the state level must comply, has to comply, deals with exacts of federal statutes or Supreme Court decisions. That has to be done. So that's what the police are following. They're following federal law. So why would I complain to a sibling about another sibling when I can go to their parents? State remedies still do not provide adequate relief for victims of state violence. The state is not going to punish the state. Piranha don't eat piranha. State law claim could exist does not preclude federal courts from providing relief separately. So if I can file at federal court and state court, why in the hell would I bother at state court knowing that state is not going to punish itself? Federal court remain an important forum to bring excessive force claims. Graham held that all claims that law enforcement officers have used excessive force, deadly or not, in the course of an arrest, investigatory stop, or otherwise seizure of a free citizen should be analyzed under the Fourth Amendment and its reasonableness standard. Most killings began with police officers responding to suspected non-violent offenses where cases where no crime was reported. Hold on, I'm going to read that one more time because, again, police apologists. If you're not doing anything, they're not going to harm you. Most police shootings began with police responding to suspected non-violent offenses or cases with no crime being reported. Don't worry, I'll wait because, again, it's nice to believe that police are responding and they're being professional. Officer Dingle, it's great to believe that. The reality is most killings, that means majority, are cases where they're nonviolent or cases where no crime is reported. "120 people were killed after police stopped them for a traffic violation." And I want 120 people were killed after police stopped them for a traffic violation. Most killings began with police responding to suspected non-violent offenses or cases where no crime were reported. 120 people were killed for traffic infractions. But again, we'll have people that make excuses for him. Oh, well, he used to do drugs. Back in 2002, he fought a cop. Or now in Phoenix. Oh, he was a gang member. Y'all remember police chief actually testified to that. Jerry actually testified to that. They were gang members. They were more violent than the Bloods and Crips and Hells Angels. She was saying that about people that were stopped at a traffic stop. She was saying that about innocent people that had committed no crime. She actually testified to that. And she also didn't know what a Brady list was. This was a cop. This was the chief. This is the head honcho. This was the person who's in charge of the violent cops that told the 2-year-old, we're going to blow your effing head off. Same cops that lied about how the father of this 2-year-old sustained injuries for a $2 baby doll. Same cops. But these are the people that we complain about and we complain to. Now, when we're doing this, there are two elements that must be applied. Because what most people don't understand, when a police officer is using lethal force, despite what we all know, and again, because originally the apprehension wasn't with a gun. Now, police are grabbing their first and most lethal weapon when they have access to pepper spray, flashbangs, lasers, hand-to-hand combat, their baton, tasers. Yet, they pull out their gun, the one that ends life immediately. They're not trained to shoot you in the arm, in the foot. They're taking headshots. They're taking chest shots. Some are just randomly ass shooting. But they're manifesting the exact thing that they're being trained to do. Because you remember, my boy, because that's what he said. We're being punished for doing what we're trained to do. We're being punished for doing what we're trained to do. I actually had a conversation with a police officer here in El Paso. And it was comical. Because I was feeling petty that day. So I asked him a couple of questions. And the officer got upset. And I started laughing. He was like, oh, you think it's funny? I said, absolutely. Now, he wasn't expecting that response. Absolutely. So when he gave me the puppy dog look, turned his head to the side, I said, you're more upset with me knowing how to do your job and not upset with the person who trained you to do your job. That's amazing to me. He sat there for another 2 or 3 seconds, and then he was like, you know, y'all go ahead and go on about your business. We're not bothering you. Oh, really? You're not bothering? And I told him, I said, thank you for giving me permission to do what I was doing. And again, he didn't realize him telling me to go on and there was no crime was a Fourth Amendment violation. That's what the funny part about it was, because he was completely oblivious to the actions he was doing, yet he was upset with me for telling him he was doing it, not upset with the person who trained him to do it. Whoops. Because I guarantee you, but you missed that one too. I guarantee it. Because at the end of the day, when they're pressed with the thing that they're supposed to do, they have what university you went to? Like books are only available in universities. I guess you're a YouTube lawyer. As if there are no such thing called jailhouse lawyers or next friend, which is in federal law. Whoops. Because again, these are trained responses. And I love to give it back to them when they say stupid shit to me. I love to give it back. Here you go. Boom. Take that with you. Because they are completely oblivious to all these things law. And I'm going to slip something to you, because they probably don't know. You're not going to learn the nuances of law in 6 weeks. Georgia. But when you're constantly programming people that they're going to be hurt when they stop someone. When you're constantly programming people that they're going to be attacked when they stop someone, that's going to deter them from using their non-lethal tools like tasers, pepper spray, batons, rubber bullets, or police dogs. It's going to deter. Why? Because their response is now subconscious, not conscious. But the whole thing is the intent to subdue the target. Because that's why I tell people whenever, one of the things that I used in my RICO case, because I learned this about juries, going with human nature. No one wants people to see someone go to jail. I humanize myself because I refuse to allow them to call me anything other than Richard. Not my whole name, just Richard. Because Richard is personal. Always understand, I humanize myself. I dressed like someone who shouldn't be in jail. Most people didn't catch that. I dress like someone that's, if I'm walking around with gold teeth and my pants sagging, they're programmed to believe that that person is guilty. I didn't look like that. Because if you actually look at my video, at the videos at the beginning, even the now thank you video, I'm clean shaved, had my teeth white. I actually wore different suits. Most people didn't even know I was a defendant. They thought I was a lawyer. They didn't know I was a defendant. I'm cross-examining folks. I'm the first chair. Anytime the judge speaks, I'm the first one to talk. They didn't know. They didn't know there were 3 people up there that was supposed to be getting heard as defendants because I didn't look like one. Even when I was a drug dealer, I didn't wear the uniform of a drug dealer. I wore glasses, shirt and tie, button-ups. I even had the 3/4 trench leather. I wore the hard bottoms. I didn't wear the uniform of drug dealer. I didn't allow people to make an assumption that I didn't want them to make. But I understood the game. Understand? I understood the game. I wasn't playing it to go to jail. I wasn't playing it to look like everybody else. I wasn't playing it to beat everyone else. I was playing it to win at my beckoning. I wasn't allowing someone else to dictate it to me. Even times when I lost dope, hey, I gotta eat that. I gotta eat that. Some people call that, oh, that's being resourceful. No, that's being understanding. That's acknowledge. And even being in El Paso, I talked to a friend of mine, and he was like, dude, I still don't have any clue what you do or how you get money or whatever. And I cracked up laughing. And I told him, I said, my biggest problem is that even Weekend talked about, I've seen the floor. It doesn't scare me. Starting from the bottom doesn't scare me. Starting from zero doesn't scare me. That's a problem because I still have a drug dealer's mentality because I don't get involved with anything I can't leave in 30 seconds if I feel the heat behind. But see, here's the thing. Now I'm more confrontational. I'm more confrontational. So it might take 2 minutes instead of 30 seconds now. But it's also to understand that I'm not going to vex these people. I'm not going to give you a reason to talk to me because if you talk to me, I am the hell and the high water. I don't care about you. I care about me. I care about mine. What's mine? I'm very selfish. I'm coming after you. I am willing to be that monster. I'm willing to lose everything to get it from you. And I'm going to take everything you believe you love. That is my mentality. The craziest part about this whole thing is not necessarily my willingness to fight back. It's my wanting to fight back. So when we're talking about cases of this, when an officer claims qualified immunity, you must first demonstrate that you were seized unreasonably and it violated a right. You must show that the right itself was clearly established. most of you have these court cases and you read them to like just infinity, and it's like, do you even know how it works? Do you even know? And the crazy part is most people have no clue. And they think if they put it on every piece of paper that it's supposed to do something, when again, it's situational, not subjective. That's why you don't use templates. Because the application of common law rules does not transfer every physical contact between a government agent and a member of the public under the Fourth Amendment. Accidental force will not qualify. Now, what constitutes accidental force? Now, that is such rareness. Like, if you actually committed a crime and you're running and they tackle you, that's accidental force. Because they even talked about, I learned, if I'm sitting out, I see the tennis shoe boys jump out, I'm not running because I'm not going to jail with an ass whooping too. Because once I get there, I can bond out. I'm not finna sit there and go through all that extra BS. But the accidental contacts come, if you actually committed a crime, yeah, you're probably going to get beat up a little bit. But it's still more difficult to prove if you actually committed a crime. Always understand that. And that's why they go out of their way to make sure they charge you with something, even if it's a secondary charge, because 95% of people don't fight back. And understand, here's a police defense. They're going to use objectively reasonable. And that's their own defense. Objectively reasonable. Was the stop objectively reasonable? Was the arrest objectively? Would an average officer do this? That's why you have to understand stock language. You know, I was in fear for my life. He's reaching for my gun. Stop resisting. Always remember, the constitutional or statutory claim, clearly established. Those are things that should be etched into your retina. Like that should burn in your eyes and in the back of your mind right now, because I've said it at least 8 times today. Matter of fact, I might say it one more time before we finish, and the conclusion is coming. But if there was a way for the actions could have been believed to be a reasonable response in the situation as perceived by the officer at the time, the Fourth Amendment is not violated. And it's because most people, the average person, is not taught law. So they'll get discouraged when they see a police officer actually answer or respond to an objection to something that they've written. But the one thing is, I always tell people, stay focused. Stay focused. That's why I ask you, what are you willing to fight for? Understand that line. It doesn't matter what they respond with. It is your willingness to keep fighting even after a response. Because now what they respond with, they now have to prove. And even in their proving, you use their proof against them. Because they can't argue, because they're so oblivious. Because they're so oblivious. You're not dealing with rocket science. You're dealing with those that unfortunately are not blessed with high IQs. It's written, it's codified, it has been said as much, not once, but hundreds of times. Am I going to believe that aspect when they say a police officer can't even determine what a probable cause is? That's why they need your consent or a judge. That's why Jordan v. City of Prince means so much, because it's then reinforced by Hogan v. Malley. You have to understand there's a reason these things are written. It's a reason why police officers need consent. Because next time you have a police stop, police encounter, and they go to pat you down or they go to give you instruction, ask them about Terryville, Ohio. Don't ask them, what is your articulable suspicion? I don't give a shit what that is. Ask them about Terryville, Ohio. Say, because you don't, and let them know you don't have consent. So what are your exigent circumstances in order to make this lawful, because you don't have a warrant from a judge? And always wait today. Well, you're not under arrest. Great. Then you don't have consent. Why are you touching me? Oh, well, I'm patting you down for my safety. Cool. What do you think I have? Because you are still not able to go in my pockets. Whoops. And you have to point to the area you think the dangerous object is. Whoops. Always understand, law is situational, not subjective. Even in this context, you have to be willing to exercise the consequences. And now, even with this, you've been armed with what they use and what you need to do to prove it against them.